Okay, it is 6 o'clock p.m. on April 15th, 2026. We will call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Northern Regional Advisory Council meeting. This meeting is being held in person at the Weber County Commission chambers and is also being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. It's why we're here today. We encourage those who want to express their opinion to fill out a comment card. Comments at today's meeting should be focused on the topics listed on the agenda. Unrelated comments will not be heard today and should be sent directly to DWR or RAC and board members for consideration at another time. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with their own. Respectful behavior facilitates efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented. Disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated, and those who engage in it will be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent. If you need to take a call, we ask that you step outside. We also ask as the meeting is over that we exit out the west side of the front doors of the building here, please. Okay, with that, let's start with RAC introductions. We'll start over here with Ross.
Ross Worthington, Public at Large.
Wyatt Selman, Agriculture.
James Carlson at Large.
Ryan Brown, Public at Large.
Avery Cook, U.S. Forest Service.
Steve, Sportsman. Steve Sorensen, Sportsman, sorry.
Hunter Stallings, Agriculture.
Garrett Larson, Watchable Wildlife.
Brandon Zundel at Large.
I'm Brad Buchanan, representing Sportsman. Okay, we would like to welcome DWR staff, specifically those providing presentations and are available to answer questions, specifically Mike Wardle, Rusty Robinson, Darren DeBloy, and Randy Opplinger. We do want to acknowledge we have one Wildlife Board member in attendance, Justin Oliver, as well as online we have Gary Nelson and Kent Johnson. Okay. Let's start off with approval of the agenda for tonight and minutes from our last meeting. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Ross, seconded by Wyatt for approval. Call for a vote. Let's raise the hands. Okay. And I think I missed one online. Is Rob online? Rob, Dale? Okay. We'll go from there. Motion passes unanimous. All right. For the summary from the last Wildlife Board meeting, which was January 8th. The first motion was to look at separating the bobcat license from the fur bearer requirements, and that passed unanimously. For the black bear recommendations, the motion was to accept the division's proposal with the new unit being Dolores Triangle and additional 10 tags, and that passed 5-1. On the predator control incentive amendments, the motion was to accept the amendments as presented by the division. That passed unanimously. For cooperative agreements for big game or turkey rule, the motion was to accept the rule as presented by the division with the addition of an annual report to the Wildlife Board. That passed unanimously. And there was also a board appeal that only went to the board. And you can see the details of that if you watch the meeting or see the minutes. So, any questions from the board meeting? Okay. Do you have any updates from the region this time?
Nope, nothing from the region this month. We'll save it for next month when the agenda's a little bit lighter.
All right. Okay, with that, let's move to agenda item number 4. Informational presentation with Mike Wardle. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Your first round of RAC meetings.
Yep.
Glad to have you. Anything you would like to clarify with us, or?
No, just a reminder that these informational permit numbers are below the 20% change threshold set in the statewide mule deer plan. So those happen automatically, which is why they were presented as informational and not as action items.
Okay. All right, we'll start off with any questions from RAC members. This is an informational item, so any questions we have on any of these?
I'm just curious, like, obviously I'd imagine deer look really good coming here out of the winter. But obviously we've got major water concerns
Right.
this year.
Yeah, we've seen really high overwinter survival this year because it was such a light winter. We are concerned about what the next year looks like, right? If we don't get good spring moisture, good monsoons, especially in the south, we could see lower body condition scores this fall. And depending on what next winter looks like, that could be okay. It might not be okay. It depends on if we have another light winter or if we have a hard winter. But we're crossing our fingers like everybody else, hoping for a little bit more moisture. But as of right now, deer populations have done really well over the winter.
Any other questions? All right. Since you're still up there, we'll move to agenda item number 5. So deer permit recommendations for 2026. Okay.
I don't have any additional information or anything.
Okay. We'll start off with questions from RAC members. No, the one for our region obviously is Camas. I don't know how much you can speak to that, or maybe the region just seems to be quite a bit lower in buck-to-doe ratio than neighboring units. Do you
Yeah.
have any indication on what the main struggles are there?
Yeah, I'll let Jim come up and talk to it if you'd like to.
Jim Christensen, Northern Region Wildlife Manager. So the Camas, yeah, it's kind of going against the trend of all the other units in the Northern Region. We're kind of concerned about that one. Part of that is harvest of the bucks. Other than that, we did start a collar study up there so that we can get a better idea of what's going on. We put some collars up there this year. We're on the schedule to do it again this coming winter. And I'm glad we had them. We've every other unit up here in the Northern Region where we do have collars, we're at least 95% survival on our adult does right now. On the Camas unit, we're sitting at 84%. And so there is some survival issues going on up there. The ones that we did get, well, 2 of them when we caught them, those does were pretty sick. We didn't get any kind of positive CWD off of them, so we're going to keep an eye on them, and just as a population as a whole, we'll watch them. But yeah, the buck-to-doe ratio, and with the hunting, we've kind of stagnated down around the 15 bucks per 100 does, and so we're going to recommend a decrease in the permits there. We put that into our projection models. looking at it with the survival and the reproduction and all that coming into it, we should be in a good place to start to rebuild that ratio after this hunt.
How many collars did we put out?
I think we got 30 this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Kind of mentioning CWD and with Bountiful sort of turning into a hotspot, is there any thoughts or provision in the plan of increasing harvest in there to try and lower transmission?
So we do have tools in the statewide plan to where we can do later season hunts to try and harvest more mature bucks. I'll let Jim talk to that specifically about Bountiful.
Yeah, and Bountiful and North Salt Lake specifically, those have mainly been straight urban deer all in town. This last year we did have one that was harvested up on the mountain by a hunter that tested positive. So we're doing some studies up there to put a whole bunch more collars up in there to keep an eye on that one. But yeah, that one's concerning. Fortunately, the silver lining, I guess, is they have been town deer and helping the city out to reduce some populations there.
Oh, sorry. Make you stop walking away. With the efforts from this winter, not just in Bountiful, but expanded out into neighboring areas, how many positive CWD have we found?
So there is a tool on there. For this last year, I looked this up the other day and I can't remember it off my head, so I'm not going to swag it for you. But we're increasing on the number of samples every year, and so yeah, it's definitely it's getting high enough to be a concern.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got just a couple, or kind of all falls into it. See some areas where it seems like we're doing really good at following the deer plan based off of like buck to doe ratios and things like that, and then there's some others where it's like it seems like there's some opportunity where why aren't we issuing more? And that's on some limited entry, that's on some general unit. I know there's a little bit of a social aspect that we have to pay attention to because some people think that bucks have babies and not does, but we have this deer plan for a reason, and then I look at it and we're well over the objective, and we're pretty limited to almost no increase in some areas in some units, and that's even on some limited entry units where we've got point creep. I just feel like there's opportunity that we're missing. I know we worried about the number of deer on the landscape, but just I guess kind of what's leading to not pushing more to follow closer to that.
Sure. So each unit's a little bit different, and there's probably a different explanation for each unit, right? But some of it, looking at it overall, some of it can be due to the changes in the statewide mule deer plan that we passed in 2024 on units where we lowered the buck doe ratio objective. We've kind of instructed the biologists to get there over the next few years, right? Not all of a sudden have to double tags and get there within 1 year. So some of it may be a scenario like that, especially on our limited entries where we went from 25 to 35. Now we're at 25 to 30. And then some of it is like you're talking about, some of it's social. We have some limited entry units where, we've recommended increases in the past. It's fully justified by the data, and it doesn't get through the public process. So yeah, it depends on each individual unit.
I guess, and there was a few I wrote down specific that, I mean, the ones that really stood out versed on the number of tags that were increased and where we're at, like Fillmore Oak Creek's at 39 bucks per 100, San Juan at 40, Vernon at 40, Diamond at 35, right? And then the adjustment on those tags. And I just go, now again, on some of those, I can speak to my own personal experience on Vernon. I think there's obviously some balance. I feel like opportunities for some management hunts on some of those, like Vernon. There's lots of trophy 2 points and 3 points that I think I'd love to see some opportunity there to try to manage those. But anyways, it was just surprising to see where for like on elk and other species, and then some areas where we're really sticking to it. I get we can't do it all in one shot, but I just would hope some people are worried about more people on landscape and how many families are out there where it's one person with a tag that's the whole family out there, where we could maybe get a few more tags into people's hands. So
Sure.
I do have a question. I tried to find the number. It's on Dolores on the triangle. I think I'm a little more curious. So last year was 53, 58 bucks
Yeah.
counted.
Yeah.
When you look at years prior, that seems like that number's an anomaly.
Yeah.
How do you factor that in when you run it in the model? I mean, do we really put in 53 as being that?
Yeah, I talked with Dustin and Joe about that, and they saw a lot more bucks this year for whatever reason. I mean, a lot of those deer come in later out of Colorado, and so they recognize it's kind of an anomaly. That's why the increase was small and not a giant increase, but they did feel like with the amount of bucks they saw in that classification, they should increase. And to get to the model point, that is taken into account because the model isn't just looking at one specific year, right? It's averaging out over the years.
Okay. But even one that high can certainly skew your average.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from RAC? No.
All right, I've got an answer to your CWD question.
Okay.
So since July, we've taken 12 positive samples in the East Canyon unit, and since 2021, 65.
Okay. 12 out of how many do we know?
I think it was 71 samples.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any questions from the public? Want to come up and? Yeah, it's time for questions. Comments will come in just a moment. Yep. Okay, let's summarize public comments.
All right, so for this agenda item, we had 7 total responses. Just to go through quickly the percentages, we had 14% strongly agree, 14% somewhat agree, 14% neutral, 14% somewhat disagree, and 43% strongly disagreed. So gives us a weighted average of 2.4 out of 5. We also had 6 comments. Just to quickly summarize those. Those that agreed with the recommendation, people like to see the increases, particularly on the box elder unit. They felt like the split between the early and late rifle hunt really helped to distribute hunters across the unit. We also had a suggestion to modify the general season draw and point system. I won't go into that, but it was a pretty lengthy suggestion there. For those that disagreed, just generally about deer permits, deer numbers, some concerns about drought's impact on deer long-term recovery, and then concern about livestock on the cache and grazing, and specifically how it may be damaging habitat on that unit.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go to public comment. Start with Adam Dennison, followed by Kevin Norman.
Good evening. My name is Adam Dennison. I'm with the Utah chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and we just wanted to come to this RAC meeting tonight and voice our support for the deer permit recommendations that are set forth by the DWR. We recognize, like you had mentioned, Ross, like what is the long term with the drought and what we experienced this winter, but we also realize that bucks don't have babies, right? So it's the does that we are still doing. We think we're doing a good job managing as a state, and we appreciate that effort. But we do have an eye to what this impact of the drought could have on future deer populations. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Norman.
Kevin Norman, representing SFW. I know I've said this before, but I'll refresh. SFW comes up with their recommendations by bringing all our chapter chairs together to form a fulfillment committee meeting. We discuss all the issues and they vote on or our position on the RAC agenda item. So with that being said, SFW supports the division's recommendations with one exception. There was some concern down on the Monroe with the fire and all that we should keep the tags at 900 rather than the increase or cut to 900. So that would be our only change to the recommendations. I'd like to also just state that, I have to giggle looking at all the comments on Facebook and everybody losing their mind about the increases. And to me, it's a success story. We're growing deer. We're, the restricted weapon hunts are doing what we hope they would. Cutting success, getting more tags, more families, more kids, more people out in the hills. And so, we had 230,000 deer tags at one time in this state, and we're about a third of that. So anything we can do to creep back up and get more tags and more people on the mountain is a success story to me. So appreciate the work of the division, and we support this. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, we'll open it up for RAC discussion.
Mike, could you go over the Monroe numbers with us real quick?
Yep, you bet. Those are included in the informational, but the permit numbers are just recommended to be the same. So we had 1,100 permits there last year. The biologist set 1,100 this year. The buck-doe ratio this past year is at 22, and the objective is 15 to 17. The year before that, it was at 24, and the year before that, it was at 21. I think the concern is because of the Monroe fire. There's folks that are concerned about deer that were burned up in the fire. From our collars, we actually didn't have any collared deer die during that fire. And we've seen this in other units like the Penguich Lake. If you remember the Bryan Head fire, the Beaver had the Twitchell fire. Those are all right there next to the Monroe. And we saw great benefits for wildlife actually. So we're not too concerned about it.
Thank you. One other question. What about, weren't there people, I know there are people with health tags that were allowed to hunt this year instead of last year.
Yep.
Did they do that with general season deer too?
They did, yep. So there were 108 people that extended from last year because of the Monroe fire, and those will be subtracted from those total permits this year.
Appreciate it.
I kind of already said it. I just feel like there's some opportunity being missed on some of those units, specifically when we're like at $40 per 100 does, and what the management plan is, and we increase by, like, I put the numbers down, but and I get it's trying to keep it in that 20%. We're not even close. We went up by 5 tags in Fillmore, San Juan by 5, Vernon was the most at 24, and Diamond by 10. When I look at the average on the deer that we're looking in the last couple of years on the bucks per 100, we're supposed to be managing down, and it seems like that number's going up. I just go, to me, it doesn't jive with what the plan is, and I really question that. I think there's, like I say, just some missed opportunity to give more hunters an opportunity out there in the field.
Yes. Best way to kill a buck is to have a tag.
Go ahead.
Please don't yell at him.
No, I think overall, from my chair, it's all, some could maybe be increased more, some maybe decreased more. I think some of that, with the camas, start with 1,000, maybe that needs to be a little less, maybe not. I think it's hard to say in 1 year, but overall, I think most of the recommendations seem to make sense with where the mule deer plan is. It's part of the informational, but I'm going to say it anyway. But I'm happy to not see increases on Morgan, South Rich, and East Canyon and Chalk Creek this year. as RAC, we do have to balance between some social and some biological, and we are over on buck-to-door ratios, but there's a social limit on how many hunters we can cram into a little bit of public land. So, but overall, I think it's pretty good work by the division. So.
I have one comment, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go on the record and make clear, like you mentioned, the 20% threshold. I just want people to know when our biologists set these permit numbers, we were really cognizant of not limiting permits to stay under that threshold. That was something that we feel like was a lot of trust given to us as biologists, and we don't want to abuse that. And so I just wanted to make that clear. Like there weren't biologists that made a recommendation that was at 21 and we came back and said, no, take it to 18. Like that didn't happen. And I just want to make sure that's on the record and clear.
Appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
And appreciate that new plan. I think that works really well. Just being able to auto adjust instead of go through them all nitpicking. So good job on that plan.
Okay. Any other comments? We'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept as presented.
I second.
Okay, motion by Brandon, seconded by Hunter to accept the deer permit recommendations for 2026 as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote. Let's do a raise of hands. See how fast I can count. Okay, we do have Rob online. Rob, can you hear us? Okay, that works. Yeah, motion passes unanimous. All right. Move to agenda item number 6, once in a lifetime permit recommendations. Rusty Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll start off. Any questions from RAC members? I know I have a few on moose, and I do see Sam is online as well. Discussion started last night a little bit in the central region we've lost some moose with the winter tick issue, and we've lost a few in the region. How many have we lost from northern, do we know? Or in this region?
Sam and Jayla would have those numbers. You have any? About 10.
10.
And just the Morgan Southridge? Okay. Is that just Morgan Southridge, or does that include cash? Region-wide.
Okay.
10 out of how many?
10 out of how many? These aren't collared. These are just random reports. Yeah. In comparison, we've documented about I think 28 on the Wasatch since February. Mostly calves, but a few adult calves.
Yeah, I think that for me, it raises the question. Obviously, we came out with recommendations. Part of this bleeds over into the antlerless side of it as well. We have some antlerless moose proposals as well, but coming out of a light winter like that, I guess at what level are we concerned that, at what point do we get to the edge of a cliff where moose drop off if we get another light winter based on the tick issue and what we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, that's the unknown. That's a great question. I think for now, we're not seeing a lot of bulls drop off. We're not seeing a lot of adults drop off. We fully expect the next couple of years for that population to drop as we see, very limited recruitment into the population. But we get a normal winter again, and hopefully those tick loads will drop back down. But yeah, it is unknown. I wouldn't want to, drastically reduce bull permits when those bulls are still in the landscape, or even if some of them end up dying. that opportunity is still there, and there's probably not a lot of sense in trying to save those bulls for next year if they're going to die anyway. But and if we do see a drop off, we would see it in the average age of harvest, I suspect, and then we could adjust next year if warranted.
Okay.
This is just, I guess, educational or learning. Haven't heard of this issue, really ever for years. It's just something that's all of a sudden upticked, and what's any idea?
Yeah, definite uptick, no pun intended. But moose are one of the few species where a really hard winter is really good for them here in Utah. And that's because you get that deep snow and it keeps tick loads down. And so after that really harsh winter of 22-23, we've actually seen a pretty big increase in overall moose across the state. And but then the last 2 winters have been fairly mild, and so we're just seeing the other end of it now, where those tick loads are getting really heavy, and so these moose, especially the calves, are just struggling with dealing with the they get anemic and have lots of issues associated with those ticks. But yeah, we fully suspect that the moose population will drop the next couple of years, and hopefully we have a decent winter to get them back on track.
Have we seen anything like this in the past? And I guess that's more, it's like, because I saw that where you talked about the harder winters being good for.
Yeah, probably not in recent history. We've certainly seen ebbs and flows, but we've been fairly consistent on moose since about 2010. But yeah, we just the last few winters we've seen both ends of the spectrum. So
thank you.
Yeah.
You and I chatted about this just a little bit, but with the bison on the book cliffs, it's like we've made increases pretty much any legal weapon hunt, but not on the archery hunts.
Yeah, and I spoke to the biologist about that today. His reasoning for not increasing the archery was just that it's 100% success. It's one of the first hunts. You're still getting part of the rut, and those hunters are typically really successful and do really well on that. And with that said, it doesn't bother him if the RAC wanted to increase a permit or 2 on that. And so we felt the recommendation last night was totally fair, and it wasn't a big deal. And it just provides one more person opportunity. So that was great.
What's the, off the top of your head, average success on the any weapon hunts there? Is it around 100% as well?
I glanced at it last night. The archery was 100 last year. And I mean, there's a lot of different rifle hunts. I think the ones I looked at were in the 80s, 86, something like that. Don't quote me on that. But it was kind of funny. The rifle hunt was less successful than the archery, but still fairly high.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? All right, let's summarize public comment.
All right, so we had 4 people respond to this recommendation. We had 1 person strongly agree, 1 somewhat agree, 1 neutral, and 1 somewhat disagree. So that's a weighted average of 3.5. And then just 1 comment. It was someone that spoke to the quality of the moose on the cache. This last year, they were a little disappointed in what they saw. But other than that was it.
Thank you. Okay, we have 1 public comment card on this agenda item. Kevin Norman.
Kevin Norman, representing SFW. We support the division's recommendations as presented. Brad alluded to the Archery Association last night, made a recommendation to increase the Book Cliff Bitter Creek archery tags by 1. The rifle is going up 80%. So there's just 1 additional tag for the archery pool, and we could definitely get behind that as well. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, we'll open it up for RAC discussion. Okay. I do like that personally. Just we're going to increase on the any weapon, and there's enough bison there on the book list. I would certainly be.
Just so I'm
supportive of that.
I
not
got
lying to you. Sorry, Steve, I looked up the success rates on those hunts. If we 100% on the archery, 100% on one of the any legal weapon, 100 on another, 67 on the cow hunt, and 91. Well, that's in the roadless. So yeah, the roadless were the ones I was misquoting on. They're about 86. And
Okay.
So
All right, thank you.
I got to disagree with you, Brad, because those hunts were done thinking they'd be lower success, and they're all high. The sheep are high, and the bison's high, and that's just basically taking tags away from people that deserve them more. You know, with our point system, deserve them more than a bow hunter with less points, in my opinion. So
I don't agree with the term deserve them more, but yeah, I understand what you're
that's a
saying.
bad term, but that's
Yeah.
what came out.
Yeah.
You're lucky something else didn't come out.
Point taken.
I didn't watch last night's meeting yet, but were we actually talking about taking anything away from the any weapon or just adding an additional archery tag on top of the total tags that are proposed for this year?
The motion last night was to add one additional archery tag and leave the any weapon permits as proposed.
So really nobody loses.
Yeah, in that scenario, yeah. Yeah, I think overall, I did raise a question about the moose. I think it comes more on the antlerless side of things, but I don't know why. Part of me just gets a little worried, I think, when we don't know exactly what's going to happen over the next few months, if all of a sudden we lose a bunch more and we see that effect a few years down the road. But on the bull side of it, we have them on the landscape. I don't know that that's necessarily a concern immediately, but it could be down the road probably. Let's just hope we get a winner.
I think on the antlerless, I had plans for, I guess, comments for later on the antlerless on the moose. Again, if we equate the same biology, it's the cows that have the babies. If we take too many off, we can have that conversation later.
Yeah.
And I do like the idea, whether it's adding one or, adjusting to reduce one on the any weapon and add one to the archery. It's just where it's 100% success all the way around. I mean, the deserve I don't agree with. It's a matter of, does it take less points on some of those? Yes. But we all have the opportunity, I guess, to pick how we want to chase them. So.
I do, since it's in the region, I'll back up one. Mountain goats on Willard Peak. We've only got one permit proposed. Is the population growing, not growing?
I'm Daniel Slee, box elder, district biologist, plus Willard Peak mountain goats. So we, what was it last year? We dropped 10 more off. Yeah. So we dropped 10 more goat. Was it 10 or 11? It was between 10 and 12 mountain goats on the mountain. So the population grew by 10 to 12 just from that. And then we also saw pretty good recruitment, well, at least birth rate this year on a ground survey. So the population is growing a bit. We're just hoping to let it grow a little bit more before we start increasing tags, because historically they've killed if we have more than a couple tags, they usually kill more nannies. So just letting it ride one more year
What's
to let
total
those little ones get
population estimate right now?
45, 50, somewhere in there. So still not a ton.
Yeah, isn't it? It's statewide, I want to call it practice. It's 25% of your adults is about where we try and issue tags.
I think it's a pretty big range. I think it's 5 to 25.
Okay.
I can tell you right now. Yeah, 5 to 25% of counted adults.
Okay.
Has there ever been any consideration on something like that of where we need recruitment of changing it to being either sex to trying to, or I don't know if that's state law or if that's do we have some flexibility to say, hey, no, it needs to.
To a Billy only hunt,
Okay,
is that what
yeah.
you're saying?
Yep.
We try not to do that just because the unintended consequences, you make a criminal out of somebody that, had, there's not enough sexual dimorphism to tell them apart sometimes for a lot of people. And we don't want to put people in that situation if we can avoid it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other discussion from the RAC? Okay, entertain a motion. Oh, Avery?
Oh, it was more of a question. But for people who receive goat tags, is there any outreach or education to encourage people to?
There is. There's an orientation course that they have to take. But yeah, they watch a video and I think answer some questions and try to know the ins and outs of identifying billies versus nannies. But we have really well trained biologists that we know that thought they were shooting a billy and shot a nanny, and really experienced hunters do the same. And so we just try to avoid those situations if we can. Yeah, that's the same reason we did away with the nanny only hunts, is because we were getting an accidental billy harvest on that. So,
Didn't you just have a goat tag?
did I have a goat tag?
Yeah. Were you the really well-trained biologist? You don't have to answer that.
No, I killed a billy, but I did almost kill a different one. So, but luckily I'm not a very good archer. So
Okay,
I
good.
missed. It was great.
All right. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendations with one change to add one tag to the archery on that book list,
Okay,
to match what the central did.
so there's 2 archery hunts on the book list. One Bitter Creek and then the other is Little Creek South.
And
one
do
to
an
each
archery
or just
for
one?
each, for each, yeah.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Ross, seconded by Brandon to accept the once-in-a-lifetime permit recommendations as presented, with the exception of adding one archery bison permit on both Bitter Creek and Little Creek South. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote, raise your hands. Okay. We do have Rob online, he's texting in his answers, so I'll wait. Any opposed?
Yes, if you can hear me.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Opposed? Motion passes. Motion passes with 1 opposed. You want to state your reason?
Just what I was talking about. I mean, we did those hunts because we thought they'd be low success, and it's taken away from people that truly deserve them more if they've been applying for way longer. If they've been applying for 15 years longer, and somebody jumps in, that's not fair. So
Okay.
I'm not opposed to them, but I wish they were low success, and they're not.
All right, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Rusty.
Thank you.
Go to agenda item number 7, back to Mike Wardle for bull elk permit recommendations for 2026. Anything you'd like to start off with?
Nope, I'm good.
All right,
Ready for questions.
start off for questions from the RAC.
I'll ask an unpopular question, but I get asked a lot about the multi-season Indy Bowl permit that we did away with a few years ago, but it wasn't really proposed to do away with it. It just at the last minute kind of went away. Is there any appetite to bring that back or do something with that like we do with the multi-season spike?
Yeah, so that went away with the revision of the statewide elk plan a few years ago. That plan calls for a mid-plan review. this summer. And that's something that we'll discuss with the committee at that point. I don't know where it'll go, but it is something I want to discuss with the committee.
Was that, I guess, sorry, a little clarification. Did that come up in the elk plan after the board passed it? Because the board kind of blindsided everybody with doing away with that before I thought that went through committee. Am I wrong in my memory?
My memory is that it wasn't part of the committee's recommendation and that it took place at the board meeting. Somebody else remember that different?
That's how I remember it.
Yeah, we discussed it at length in the elk committee, almost every meeting, but it wasn't part of the recommendation. Well, it wasn't part of the committee's recommendation to the division. So
To take the multi-season off.
right. Yeah, if I remember right, and this is just my memory, I think it was with a cap at 7,500, but yeah, I could be wrong.
That sounds right.
Okay. One of these, and maybe this is more of a discussion with the elk plan, I don't know, but the late archery hunts, which really are low success hunts, some of these are pretty close to zero year over year, obviously. So just seems like we've been, as a whole, over the last 3 years, a little slow to add tags on those, even with really low success rate. Is there kind of reasoning behind that?
I think it's because it's new, and we've been wanting to get more years of data to see what the success rate really looked like. That's another item when we have our mid-plan review that I want to look at the language in the plan to try and kind of push us to issue more of those, because you're correct, success rates have been low. A lot of the feedback has been really positive for hunters just to be able to get out. It's a hard hunt, but you get to, I mean, most of those units, you can find bulls almost every day and hike your butt off and not kill one, but it's fun. So we had a lot of positive feedback, and yeah, I'm with you. I'd like to see more of those in the future.
How low the because it's a 2-week hunt, isn't it, for the most part, or on most of those units?
I'll look up the dates.
I just curious in those conversations if there's been any thought of, okay, do you give them any other additional time, an extra week or something like that, just where it's so low?
I mean, the
Right,
purpose.
if we're looking for harvest, right? The idea is to try to get some harvest out of it. If it's so low, it's
Sometimes if you add length to the season, success goes down even worse. They don't take it as serious.
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of the hunt was to be low success, and we don't take the ages from these animals into our calculation, into our average age calculation. They were specifically left out. So we're not necessarily trying to get harvest out of it. It's more of an opportunity hunt for folks.
Yeah, it was one of the tools brought in to, again, try and address some point creep in some way that had, quite frankly, minimal impact on the herds, and knowing success rates would probably be low, and they're low. I mean, they're zero on most units most years. So
I know people that have had them that love it though. I mean, they're making multiple stocks and
Yeah, that's a fun hunt.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, questions from the public? All right, summarize public comments on this.
All right, for this agenda item, we had 7 people respond to this one. 14% strongly agreed. We had 57% somewhat agree, 14% were neutral, and 14% strongly disagreed. A pretty high weighted average of 3.6. And then we had 6 comments on this one. There was a comment about the multi-season general elk option. Wanted that to be considered. And we're also concerns about elk numbers in general, concerns about how we survey elk using winter surveys. There were some crowding issues that was specific to the Wasatch unit, and particularly probably not understanding that the spike hunt overlapped with the mid-season rifle hunt. Concerns about ages and elk in the West Desert, west part of Box Elder County units around Grouse Creek and Pilot Mountain. And then a concern about drought impacts on elk populations. And then also a comment similar to the deer one about concerns about livestock grazing on the cache unit and how that may be damaging elk habitat.
Okay, thank you. Got one public comment card from Kevin Norman.
Kevin Norman representing SFW. We support the division's recommendations with one exception. Our boys down on the Nebo had some angst about the big increase of elk tags on the Nebo. So the vote was to leave those tags the same with no increase. That was outside the 20% too. So I believe it is up for discussion. So other than that, we support the division's recommendations. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Just one note, the 20% doesn't apply to elk, thankfully. Okay, open it up for RAC discussion.
I wasn't a big fan of when that 3 season went away. I feel like there's some opportunity. Anyway, so I'd love to somehow see that find its way back. It sounds like conversations down the road, maybe not as many like the unlimited, but restricting it as I do recall, I think it was presented to reduce the number of those that were offered. Yeah, all in all, like what's done. I'll just make a comment just for a reminder of public. I mean, it just kind of goes to these things that were forgot why some of these hunts were created. The mid-season hunt was created for opportunity. You choose to put in for that hunt knowing that you're going to be out there with everybody chasing spikes, and that's going to create some additional challenges. But I tell you what, it's a hunt I put some own family members in for because it's an opportunity, and you still find the bulls. So anyways, just kind of a comment of, yeah, that's what it's for. It's expected that, yep, you're going to have the crowds, and you know that going into it, and that's just the choice you make.
Okay. Overall, I didn't see much on the elk that concerned me. And honestly, if I had a magic wand, I'd probably increase every limited entry late archery by about 5 permits, just because we're 3 years into it with low success. I think it's just a good way to honestly run some people through the system. The demand is there. There's plenty of applicants every year. So, but that's just, if I was king for a day, that's probably where it would go. So
I think that the permit number increase also scares people when they think that, oh, they're issuing 35 more tags or whatever, that they think that's 35 more elk or deer that are being killed off of the unit that year, which is not true. It's on the percentage, right, of success rate. And so only 6 more elk might be killed off of that. And so it's hard to wrap your head around when you get all these tag increases that you think there's that many animals that are going to be leaving the landscape, which is not true.
Mike, do you have 3 years of data on that already? Or is it, this will be the 3rd year?
I think we've got 3 years. Yeah. Let's see, the plan was redone in 23, I believe, right? That's not right? I don't know. The years are running together, and I'm only 35, so.
It's all downhill
3
from
years.
there, Mike.
Yeah, 3 years of data.
okay. Any other discussion? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion. And to back up that low success rate bow hunts are awesome. Mike, what would be a good number to add to those in your opinion, just off the top of your head? If we're zero,
So all of them have a minimum.
1%.
So all of them have a minimum of 5. The 5 permits was set in the plan. A lot of them, most of them have increased. I think the highest are, I think like the Beaver has 20. The Provence right there with 15 or 20. So somewhere they're 5 to 20 on all these units. So I'm not going to throw out a number for you, Steve, but
Okay. I got a number from Ross. I'll make a motion that we accept the division's proposal as presented with one exception. We'll add 5 tags each one of those.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Steve, seconded by Ross to accept the bull elk permit recommendations for 2026 as presented, with the exception of adding 5 permits to all of the limited entry late archery bull elk hunts. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Raise your hands. Rob?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimous. All right, agenda item number 8, pronghorn permit recommendations for 2026 with Mike. This is a good first run of meetings for you, Mike.
Yeah, this is a lot better in Central Region.
Before we leave the elk, didn't you make the comment last night you felt like we could grow elk in a parking lot?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did make
all
that
right, I'll
comment,
Make
yeah.
sure. Is that,
I mean, it's got to be a good parking lot, but it could be done.
all right, on to pronghorn.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Start off with any questions from RAC members?
I had just seen that they, like, in the box elder units, they'd cut doe. Oh, I guess that's antlerless. Would that be an antlerless or pronghorn that they cut?
Yeah,
like
being
the
a
tags?
antlerless for
Okay,
doe pronghorn. Yep.
we'll wait.
All right, any questions from the public? Okay. I'm
I guess
summarize.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
Just last year was kind of year one of seeing pretty significant increase down on Parker. And just how did that all turn out, like harvest success wise and overall satisfaction?
Yeah, harvest success was good. The Parker is an interesting one because if we hunt them too hard, they just disappear and they go long distances. So we've tried to be really creative in spreading out hunts, spreading out pressure. It's also tough because it's a unit where you have deer hunters and elk hunters and then just recreationists too. But yeah, overall, it's been just fine. It's gone well. We're still over the population objective on the Parker. So when we get to antlerless, you'll see a recommendation for, I think, for 250 doe tags. Yeah, no major concerns.
Okay. Want to summarize public comments?
Okay, so for pronghorn, we had 3 people respond. 1 person really liked it, 1 was neutral, and 1 somewhat disagreed. So it's an average of 3.3, no comments, so really no insights into why they were thinking what they did.
Okay. 1 public comment card. Kevin Norman. You could have just sat in the front row tonight, Kevin.
I know. Kevin, representing SFW. We support the division's recommendations as presented. I'd like to thank a couple RAC members. First, Brad, thanks for pointing out my stupidity. And Steve, thanks for being bipolar on the archery permits. Thanks.
All right.
I'll explain the definition of bipolar to you after the meeting.
Okay. Open it up for RAC discussion. All right. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the pronghorn permit recommendations as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Wyatt, seconded by James to accept the pronghorn permit recommendations as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Call for a vote. Raise your hands. Rob?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimous. All right. Agenda item number 9, antlerless permit recommendations for 2026 with Mike still.
Yep. Again, no new updates, but happy to take any questions.
Okay. Start off with questions from RAC members.
I got a question on the Camas and the North Slope Summit units. As long as there's no typos in the presentation, which I don't think there was, but you have like an estimated population on Camas of 430 and North Slope Summit of 250. Is that's right?
You talking
For elk, sorry, for elk.
elk?
Yep.
Does that sound right, Jim? I can pull it up. So say those numbers again.
So on your slide, you had for Camas, you had a population estimate of 430, and North Slope Summit was 250 on antlerless elk.
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. My question was, so like on those two units, like I know the success rates are super low, but there's a lot of cow tags getting doled out, or recommended at least, to go through the public draw. So like on Camas, it's representing like, let's see here, I wrote it down, 93% of the population, and on North Slope Summit, 150% of the population. At least that's the numbers that were presented. Just I was just wondering why we're doing that heavy on the cow tags.
Yeah, so that goes into our population surveys, and we'll survey those in the wintertime, and it doesn't necessarily mesh up with what is there during the hunts. So like on the North Slope, we know we have way more elk than that during the hunts, and then they pull off into Wyoming. And then when we fly in the wintertime, Utah elk at that point, and we set that objective on a wintering objective.
Sure.
And so there's a little more opportunity there. Same with the Camas, there's some movements in between when we fly and when we issue the permits. And so we try and, mesh those up as best we can to where we're actually hunting the animals that are there during the hunts.
Gotcha.
Where did the Camas elk go?
So we've got some on the west side of the Camas. We're putting some collars out again. We just did see if we're getting some movement over onto the Chalk Creek unit and just where those are all going. We can pull some over into the Northeast region on the South Slope. We get some movement over there, and then into the Central region. We're just right there on the edge of a couple different regions and different units.
Thank you. Sorry, Jim, before you sit down. I did have a landowner contact me out on Grouse Creek with some concerns about that. Maybe biologists might want to talk to that. What, if any, strategies we have or changes out there, and he's pretty concerned about the elk that load up on his property in the fall.
Yeah, so the elk in Grouse Creek have increased nearly exponentially in the last couple of years due to elk moving across the border from Nevada, primarily. That's what's happening. And there's just kind of been a shift in the time of use in the valley over the last few years. Elk used to be a big problem in the early summer, but now they're a problem in the winter. And yeah, we had almost 400 elk in a field in one night when the population objective is 175. We have collars on those elk to just watch the movement, and pretty much right now, well, now they're all kind of spread out, but a lot of them are in Nevada, and then they'll start pouring in the later in the year. So we have a few things we're doing to try to increase just overall harvest and pressure on those animals. We're working with the landowners at the last, so 3, 4, 5 years ago, there really wasn't that big of an elk problem. So we decreased the amount of mitigation tags we gave them, and then we kind of shifted to give them a few up front because we know some elk are going to come in, and then once those elk, if they continue to be a problem, give them more. We're just going to give them a bunch of permits right off the bat because we know there's going to be a lot of elk. So when they're on the private land and within the buffer, those hunters can hunt them from August 1st to January 31st. We also did I forget what we call it. Antlerless elk control, I think, hunt. So any deer or elk hunter has the option to buy a cow elk tag. So we should get a lot of pressure starting when deer hunters and elk hunters, deer hunters open up in August. And then when the last
of those hunts close, we are starting up a antlerless elk public land hunt with 30 tags to increase harvest. Last year, we didn't have any public land cow elk hunting out there because the last 5 years we had a season and they killed like 3 elk in 5 years. But yeah, so we shifted that later to hope that'll help. Part of the reason the elk have come over is Nevada was about 1,000 elk over their objective, so they poured hunters into that area on the whole unit group. What is it, like 081, 076, that kind of unit group? There are, I think, 500 cow elk hunters, and then just in 081 itself, there was another special hunts there to just get cow hunters in there. So there's a whole lot of pressure coming from Nevada to push them over. So we're trying to meet that pressure on our side as well. Nevada should be backing off a little bit this year. They just got a population objective increase approved. So they're like right at their objective now. So they're still going to obviously be harvesting elk. So the population shouldn't grow above that, but there won't be as strong of pressure coming over. So hopefully we can shoot a whole lot of elk and push them back to Nevada.
So are we matching the season dates of Nevada so we don't just play ping pong?
No, but through the antlerless elk control hunt and mitigation vouchers and public land hunting, there should always be some pressure in Utah right now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
You know what the roundabout dates when Nevada's hunting the cows? Is it December?
No, that's I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know they start in August with archery. They have muzzleloader hunts. They have rifle hunts. I think they shut off. Well, no, I don't know. I do know some areas in Nevada do have it through January hunting. I don't think that unit's one of them, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
Cool.
Does that elk control tag, is that available to the CWMU operators out there as well?
No, because in the CWMU plan, that to have that as an option, you need to be more than 10% over objective for 3 years. And 3 years ago, we didn't have a problem. So we're not at that yet. But when we do hit that threshold, we will start it up as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you. Any other questions? Since I started it, we can talk moose. We've got 10 permits recommended on Morgan. 7? 10?
Correct. 7 any legal weapon and 3 archery.
Okay. What's our population versus objective?
You want to speak to that, Jayla?
I always have to adjust the mic. Jayla Walden, the district biologist from Morgan South Rich. So we're sitting at 775 moose and the objective is 500.
775 on Morgan.
Mhm.
Okay. Outside of the 10 antlerless permits, how many CWMUs are given antlerless moose permits? Do you know?
Ooh. Darren, do you know what the total is off cuff? Sorry, I don't have it
Just
memorized.
curious if we're only hunting antlerless moose on public.
No,
versus private.
we have 3 or 4 CWMUs that are doing antlerless as well.
Okay. And we didn't fly because of winter conditions this year, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And the losses in the region haven't been on Morgan yet? Just Ogden and Cache, correct?
Yeah, it's mostly been, so there's been 1 in Morgan South Rich. Everything else has been the other units.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
I've hunted that with a neighbor, and there's not a lot of public ground.
Yeah.
And they're gonna all be on top of each other, and you won't have any moose on public ground. That was disturbing to me 3-4 years ago on that hunt. And there's only, I think, 3 or 4 tags given back then. I'm not sure, but it was kind of like, I don't like this.
I'm curious with I don't know if Lindy, I don't know who would answer this. The private land only permits for elk. Now that we have mandatory reporting, can we see how many elk are harvested on just that permit in each unit? Is it able to break out that far?
Yeah, we have that information. It's going to take me a second to pull it up because my database is not pulling, but I can get that for you.
Yeah, I'm just curious on some of these units that have a lot of CWMUs, how many elk are we really harvesting with the private land only permit? Okay. Any other questions while they're looking that up? Okay, any questions from the public? All right, let's summarize public comments.
Yeah, so for this agenda item, we have 2 responses. This is going to be really helpful. One person loved it and one person hated it. So I don't even know how you interpret that. But there was one comment, I think specifically to Avery. It was habitat concerns in forest. There was too much old growth. So that one's for you.
What unit was that?
I think it's at all forests in Utah.
We need more berms.
You take care of that. Just start at the top on Cache and come south. That would be great. All right. All right. One public comment card with Kevin Norman.
Kevin Norman representing SFW. I think it's my last time. We support the division's recommendations with one exception. There was some concern on the Parker with, are we on antelope? Are we on antelope too? Okay.
Yeah.
With just the way the Parkers fluctuated so much over the last few years, wanted to see those doe tags stay or be dropped to 200 rather than 250. That'd be it. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.
Brad, do you want those numbers from
That
private
would be
lands only?
great.
Just looking at Morgan Southridge, looks like we're at 25% success for private lands only. You have other units you want to look at?
Yeah.
Would you please share Camus?
Camus. Last year we were at 28%. It's pretty par for the course. The year before we were at 21. The year before that was 35.
All right.
With those numbers, I'm still back on the Camus unit and the idea of, you were saying that.
Wait, hang on one sec. Sorry, I lied. That was the LaSalle's. So last year was 55%. The year before that was 44, and the year before was 62%. So quite a bit higher.
And the Camus with the private land.
Camus
only.
private lands only. Yep. Not LaSalle's. Different places.
And when we're taking our census, our flights and stuff of how many cow elk are in the Camus unit, because of the time of year, we're counting 430, something like that. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was 430.
And we're calculating the number of tags or the self tags off of a number or a percentage greater than that 430, anticipating that there's some that have moved out by the time we're making the counts.
Yeah, and with this one, on the general unit itself, we're actually recommending a decrease in permits, but putting more into the private lands only, so that we can harvest on the private lands and try and push them back onto the public lands, because we have been seeing some decreases on the public land.
And that gets to Covey's presentation a couple years ago about elusive elk moving onto private lands in response to pressure.
Right, yeah, and we, so in all those private land units, the 4 units, 4, 5, and 6, we've been doing a similar strategy of putting more pressure on the private lands to try and kick them back. And I know some public hunters don't necessarily like that, because it feels like we're pulling the opportunity away from them and only giving it to the private hunters. But there's not as much opportunity on the public land because we've had a little too much pressure. And so it's pushed them into those areas of less pressure. And we're trying to reverse the trend and still offer some opportunity, but try and get some more animals back onto the public and non-CWU grounds.
Because repetition is an effective instructional strategy and for redundancy. So you're saying the overall number of cow elk tags in Camas is decreasing, but you're shifting at the same time some or more over to the private lands only hunts with the purpose of pushing the cow elk that are there onto public land for those who have a tag that had worked there.
Yeah, so our private lands only, we're recommending the same number of permits. The archery antlerless, we're down 50. The Camas, we're down 25. The Oakley, we're down 25. And then the antlerless control is just staying the same. Whoever buys a permit buys a permit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're to RAC discussion. I lost our place. Hey, any other discussion?
But I think it's valid to talk about so we're obviously well over objective, it sounds like, on moose currently. But I mean, if we're not getting any calf recruitment or they're not surviving, I mean, are we heading to a cliff really quick? Is that something that needs to be, because again, that's handled more through the antlerless, I'd assume, than through bull. And so are there other areas where we're increasing where there's that same concern with the ticks that need to be taken into consideration, that we get ahead of it, or we find a wait a year and kind of see where it is after, do we get a big winter, and or do we have, now we're 2 years into it where it's becoming a bigger issue. I don't know. I just get concerned about, it going from hey, we're okay now, but it becoming a big problem real quick.
Yeah, I think that's partially where my concern lies. And the hard part is we don't know what will happen. It does seem like the losses on the moose side are relatively recent. Is that fair to say, Rusty? Like the ones on the Wasatch, I mean, this wasn't over the entire winter, right? This is just
No, we
recently?
started getting most of the reports starting in February, and then up until current.
Okay.
Yep.
Are we concerned that we're going to continue to see an increased rate of moose dying from this with no winter? I mean, we're heading right into the summer. If they're dying now, like what's that?
We may, but I think history's told us, and Sam's the tick expert. If Sam's still on, he might be able to speak to when the seasonality of mortality events on ticks. Is it limited to this time of year, Sam, or do we see it throughout the summer typically?
Yeah, so it is limited to the spring. So kind of the life cycle of the winter tick is you have these big female winter ticks that are on the moose right now. They drop off the moose in the spring. They go out in the brush and the litter and lay their eggs. And then in the fall, those eggs will hatch, and those little nymphs, they call them, the ticks will go up in the brush in the fall. And then the moose will walk by in the fall. The moose picks up those winter ticks in the fall, and it'll carry those ticks throughout the winter. That's why they call them the winter tick. Those winter ticks will be carried on that moose until the next spring, and then the cycle will start over. So if the moose can make it through the springtime, it'll start to recover from those winter ticks because those ticks will fall off. It will keep some of the male ticks, but the big females will fall off, and they take the most blood. So if they can get through May, they'll rebound, but the cycle will start over again following that fall. So we really need some snow, because really cold falls are good when we have some hard freezes. That kills the new nymphs when they're trying to attach to the moose. And then also the really wet, cold springs when we have snow on the ground will kill the females when they fall off and try to lay their eggs. So it's critical that we get winter with snow for that reason. And this isn't just affecting, we're starting to see ticks more on some of the other species as well. And that's not affecting those species because they, like elk and deer, are much better at grooming. They call them program grooming, and they'll groom those ticks off. But moose, they won't groom until they feel an irritation. It's usually too late when they start grooming.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think it's a little hard. It's because, well,
You don't make the weather?
well, that too, but and at the same token, we're talking about Morgan South Ridge, which is over objective.
Yep.
On moose, but at the same time, these are public land permits that there's not a lot of public land on, so there's just a lot of dynamics in that one. But I don't know. I tend to side more on the conservative side of that one, and maybe bringing those permits back just a little bit for this year until we get a better idea. But that's just being on the safe side in my mind. I don't know. It's more of a long-term issue, I think, that we would see down the road from losses from this year if it's cows and calves. Okay.
Is there any idea of what the mortality rate's been on calves like the last year or even this year coming out of it with what we're seeing?
First of all, I want to tell Sam that was impressive. He doesn't come across as a nerd, but that was next level. That's a superpower. I don't know that we have really great survival rates on calves in particular. Most of the collaring efforts we've been doing have been on adult cows. Sam could give you historical calf survival rates and typically what they look like. But I don't know, Sam or Jayla, do you have a better idea on that?
We did have some, calves collared on the Wasatch, and we did do some surveys. We did our calf searches when we were doing the moose research when I was there, and then we'd do some follow-up in the spring. But we didn't have a lot of collars on them at the time, so it was a little bit subjective on what we found. But calf survival during that time was fairly low. We were in the 40%, 35%, depending on the year. But we did. Then we weren't seeing so much the calves being lost by a lot of calves being lost to ticks, but we were seeing the female moose were not producing as many calves because of ticks.
What a simple problem.
Sam is pretty smart. He could probably tell the difference between a billy and a nanny.
You probably could. He's a much better biologist than I am.
All right. Any other discussion from RAC members? Okay. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Got a motion by Hunter, seconded by Avery to accept the antlerless permit recommendations as presented. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, feel like we need to, in the future, look at that moose hunt on Morgan South Ridge and just make sure, if it's a public land problem with the moose, let's hunt them there. But if it's a private problem, let's hunt them on the private.
Okay. Call for a vote. Raise your hands. Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimous. All right. Agenda item number 10, CWMU antlerless permit recommendations with Darren.
How's it going? I don't have anything to add to the presentation, so I'm happy to take questions.
Okay.
You gonna still be hard on him?
Yeah, come on, Steve. Bring it on. We'll do arm wrestling.
Okay. Any questions, RAC members?
Must have done good.
I know in just in years past, we've been seeing a trend to try and get some of the CWMUs to start harvesting more like cow elk and stuff. Are we seeing that happening, and is it getting better?
This was a hard year, and I got to compliment our CWMU operators. They really stepped up and worked their guts out this year to get that harvest, because they didn't have elk where they normally do, and when they did have them there, they really had to cover some ground because it was just so open. So we they would call me and they were real worried that what was going to happen if they didn't make their harvest, but they all really did step up and really work with our public hunters to do that. So kudos to them. That includes all of them. I haven't had any complaints about any of from the public that they didn't get an opportunity. So they did a really good job this year. And we have asked them a lot if they're on a unit that's over objective. We changed the rule to have some sort of reporting requirements to the CW Advisory Council if they're not pulling their weight. But they all have really stepped up, and we're really happy with that effort.
Any other questions? Okay. Any questions from the public? All right. I'll summarize public comments.
Yep, we got one response. They strongly agreed and didn't leave a comment.
Okay. No public comment cards on this, so open it up for RAC discussion. All right. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass the CWMU antlerless permit recommendations as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Ross, seconded by Steve to accept the CWMU antlerless permit recommendations as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote. Raise your hands. Rob?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimous. Thanks, Darren. It was the easiest meeting you've had in many years. All right. Agenda item number 11, aquatic rule amendments for R657-3C and 59A.
Chad's probably wondering how he got away with it so easy.
Yeah, Chad's going to want to come back to the CWMUs. Okay. Okay, Randy?
Yeah, I think before we get going, I'd just like to say good evening. And before the RAC discusses the DWR's aquatic rule proposal, I want to briefly touch on how we developed this proposal and why the proposed changes are a win for Utah's private aquaculture partners. We didn't build this proposal in a vacuum. Over the past 6 months, we've been in regular contact with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, including 3 separate meetings and multiple phone calls, emails, and text messages. We kept the Department of Agriculture informed about changes in our rule language as the rule was being developed. The Department of Agriculture did ask a lot of questions about the process for purging New Zealand mud snails from fish prior to stocking, but any concerns they had about our actual rule proposal was not expressed during these conversations. In addition, the division presented the rule changes to Utah's private fish producers in January to a positive response. We specifically engaged with the one fish producer who has New Zealand mud snails. We answered questions that he had and invited him to participate in the development of the rule, but he didn't respond. The division also responded to his request to set up meetings for additional discussions, but he never responded to confirm dates. Ultimately, the goal of this proposal is to balance industry needs with the protection of Utah's fisheries. Right now, New Zealand mud snails are a major threat. They reproduce asexually, so it only takes one stray snail to start a new population. Currently, if a hatchery has these snails, they have to purge every single load of fish before stocking, and that process is labor intensive. Our proposal moves us towards a common sense, case-by-case approach that we feel provides additional opportunities for the private aquaculture industry while protecting our native wildlife species. In the vast majority of cases under our proposal, we would allow stocking without purging. We only require in situations where the stocking could potentially impact native spring snails. Under this proposal, there are situations where we may deny a certificate of registration request, but those situations would be very rare and would be limited to scenarios where the stocking poses an extremely high risk to our native spring snails. Our proposal provides critical mechanisms that will protect our native spring snails, many of which have been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act. The main reason why native spring snails have not been listed is because there are safeguards in place that prevent New Zealand mud snails from invading their habitat. Our proposal keeps the essential safeguards in place, which should help prevent a federal listing. If native spring snails were to be listed, it would be a regulatory nightmare for private growers and landowners, and a federal listing could also impact our public fisheries. Finally, this proposal opens doors. Arizona has restricted the import of fish from growers that have New Zealand mud snails, but Arizona has indicated they're willing to adopt regulations similar to what we're proposing tonight. This paves the way for local producers to get back into that market. It should be noted that under our proposal, all stocking by growers that have New Zealand mud snails will require a certificate of registration. The pond owners themselves request these certificate of registration, so this proposal does not add to the burden of the fish grower. The bottom line is our proposal would allow private fish growers that have New Zealand mud snails to avoid the labor-intensive purging process for the majority of their sales in the state while maintaining safeguards that protect Utah's native spring snails. So thank you for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions tonight if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Start off with any questions from RAC members?
So this just impacts the private buyers of the fish? Is that what it mainly does, or
what it would mainly do is if the private buyer, so if somebody who would like to purchase fish for stocking in their private fish pond would like to purchase their fish from a grower that has New Zealand mud snails, we're requesting them to have a certificate of registration in hand. And then what we're proposing from a division perspective is we would look at that certificate registration request. We would look at distribution of native spring snails in proximity to that pond, and also where we have New Zealand mud snails, and make a decision on whether we allow stocking into that pond or whether we require purging prior to stocking those fish. So what it would do is it'll allow us on a case-by-case basis to really evaluate that pond and the potential impact that stocking could have on our native spring snails before we make a decision on how we would proceed with allowing that pond to be stocked.
Are there any other known mechanisms of transfer between areas with spring snails to some of the water bodies that have the native spring snails, either waterfowl or
yes,
frogs or
so
anything
there
else?
are other mechanisms out there that could spread New Zealand mud snails to habitats with native spring snails, and those are things that we have to consider. Some of the things are like waterfowl that you mentioned are a mechanism. Cattle have been documented as a mechanism, and anglers have also been documented as a mechanism to move New Zealand mud snails. They haven't been documented in our native spring snail habitats. A lot of those native spring snail habitats, we're talking isolated, really small kind of ponds that don't draw a lot of interest among anglers, but there are locations where waterfowl or cattle may go to.
I didn't catch if we had the New Zealand ones in our waters already.
Yes, we do.
We do.
So they are documented, not statewide, but I think, we've got about 75 locations in the state where we've documented New Zealand mud snails.
If I remember right, we haven't seen an effect on fisheries from the mud snails.
that would be correct. So looking at our fish data from those areas where we have New Zealand mud snails, we have not seen the mud snail have an adverse impact on the fish themselves or the fish populations.
So this isn't like a zebra mussel type
It's
concern?
It's a little bit different. So, I mean, I think there's similar potential where I think both species, we're talking about species that numerically could get very high densities and they could consume a lot of the primary resources that fish ultimately rely on for food. So I think for both, you could have potential concerns just because of their numbers of potentially high impact. In the case of New Zealand mud snails, we've had them here in Utah for a little bit longer than zebra mussels. We've had them in some additional locations. We've had some additional data to draw from to assess the impact. And again, to our fish populations, we haven't seen any negative impacts.
Thank you.
Is it possible to extirpate them from a isolated private fish pond?
From a fish pond or a fish hatchery?
Both? Either?
Probably, I asked that, but honestly, both are difficult. I think in the wild, like you take a fish pond, it's more difficult from a perspective of there's just more refuge areas where they can go and hide in the mud and stuff like that. That's difficult to get to and treat. Hatcheries, there's been some success, but that success has been very spotty. It's also very difficult, but within a hatchery setting, you have more opportunities to, dry things out, disinfect concrete, reconstruct critical areas, that kind of thing. I'm not saying that's 100% successful, but there's more opportunity there.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Okay. Summarize public comments.
So we had 2 people respond to this one. One person strongly agreed and one somewhat agreed. No comments.
All right. No public comment cards for this agenda item, so open up for RAC discussion.
I'm just going to make one quick little comment and just in talking about it, if anything to help prevent from federal government having to come step in and put something on a protective, if we can take control of that here, I would sign up for that any day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I appreciate the work and the efforts that have gone into that. It just gives us that local control that just I feel like it's so much more efficient.
Okay. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the rule amendments as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Ross, seconded by Brandon to accept the aquatic rule amendments as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote. Raise your hands. And Rob?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimous. Okay, thank you. That was the last agenda item. Got a motion to adjourn?
Motion made.
So moved. Thanks, Ross. Thank you.